Hello, friends. Now the Tibetan begins to become specific about the forms of meditation that are being used. He has listed them here, and we mentioned them in our last program. Number one, forms used in work on the three bodies. Two, forms on certain rays. Number three, forms used in healing. Number four, mantrams. Five, forms used in one of the three departments. A, the Manu's department. B, the department of the world teacher or the Christ. C, the department of the Lord of civilization. And then number six, forms for calling elementals. Number seven, forms for contacting the devas. And finally, number eight, special forms connected with fire. Okay. So we're going to begin first with the general introduction to the use of specific forms for specific ends. And we're on page 154 of Letters on Occult Meditation. Until now, we have dealt more with the personal aspects of meditation and have considered the two types that are practically universal and fundamental, having studied briefly A, meditation as followed by the mystic, and B, meditation as pursued by the occultists. So those are the two general categories, and I'll just isolate them here for a second in case it's of value for people to go over this particular document. Okay. We have largely generalized and have not in any way attempted to enter into particulars. It is neither desirable at this stage nor proper. Okay, we cannot release too much information too quickly to you, is what he's saying, to all of us, because probably it's necessary first to grasp the general outline of the subject rather than plunge into the attempt to utilize the detail. At a certain point in meditation, nevertheless, when the pupil has made the desired progress and covered certain specific stages and attained certain objectives, which attainment can be ascertained by a review of the pupil's causal body, and so we see what kind of teachers we really have to have to determine the next possible steps. And when a foundation of right living has been laid which neither storms nor attack, will be liable easily to upset or destroy, the teacher may impart to the earnest pupil instructions whereby he can build in mental matter and under definite rules forms that will lead to specific actions and reactions. There are so many qualifiers here, are there not? So many requirements before the teacher can release these specifics. A certain point in meditation has to be attained. The foundation of right living has to be very stable so that the usual buffets of life and even more serious attacks and storms cannot upset the equilibrium or destroy it. And then the teacher may impart to the earnest pupil instructions for true building in mental matter, and following definite rules lead to the kinds of specific actions and reactions that we might even now hope to achieve, but the time is not yet. These forms will be imparted gradually, and at times the pupil, this especially at first, may not be in the least conscious of the results achieved. He will obey the orders, say the imparted words, or work through the outlined formulas, and the results attained may do their work even though the pupil is unconscious of the fact. So we have some unconscious white magic going on here. And first of all, one must simply be, obedient. That is the requirement, because if we pay close attention to what is imparted and fulfill it in every particular, then the results will occur whether or not we are aware of the occurrence. Not in the least may he be conscious of the results achieved. And notice obedience is the very first factor here. He will obey the orders. So the fulfillment of these orders using the seventh ray is necessary. The imparted words will be said. The outlined formulas worked through, and the results inevitably attained. Well, we're preparing for that. I'm beginning to see how a book like this, even though written 100 years ago, could be, and I think will be, a foundational book in the work of the new schools. It's a three-part bridging effort, and what is given in the Secret Doctrine, what is given through the Bailey books, and what will be given starting around the year 2025, I think will be a foundational curriculum, except, of course, for that which is imparted verbally or, through the oral tradition, and not committed to print. And no doubt there will be much of that type of impartation. Certain things just can't be written down because they will be obtained by those who are not ready to use them, and almost inevitably such people will try to use them. Later, especially after initiation, as the subtler faculties come into activity and the centers are rotating in fourth dimensional order, which is the sign of initiation that it has occurred, he may be aware of the effects of his meditation on the emotional and the mental planes. We begin to see that none of this process can be rushed. And really we have, 2,000 or so years in which these new schools will make their appearance, and the curricula will be presented, and obedience will be required, and results will occur, but it will not be rushed. And I suppose the personality, which is generally ruled generically by Mars, is in a rush, realizing, as the Tibetan has said, that from the personality perspective, time is short. But be that as it may, we will have to go along with the program. There is no rush, no hurry, and yet there is no time to lose. And each pilgrim, realizing this, presses his footsteps forward until he finds himself surrounded by his fellow men. Some move ahead, he follows after. Some move behind, he sets the pace. Results never concern us. Strict obedience to the law and steady adherence to the rules laid down, with skill in action aimed at, are the part of the wise pupil. The effects, then, are sure and carry no karma with them, or some kind of retribution which returns and demands time to adjust. So that's an interesting statement. Results never concern us, because the law will, when properly practiced, will carry through to the achievement of the proper results. So that's something we can remember as we attempt with a degree of strictness to fulfill what is given to us as the proper procedure. Now, here's another ellipse. So something has been said here that he chooses not to share in written form, at least with the wider public. Let us take up each of the forms in order. But first I would give a warning. I do not intend to outline forms or to give specific instructions as to how the results indicated may be achieved. This will be done later, but when, it is not possible to say. Okay. So he doesn't intend, later. And, who knows, maybe that later is part of the third installment of the teaching, and maybe it actually occurs within the schools as they become established. About some time cycles, he's deliberately vague. He says it can't be said. It's not possible to say when the particulars will be given. So much depends upon the work done during the next 7 years, or on the group karma, also on the progress made, not only by the human hierarchy, but by the deva or angel evolution as well. Well, this was written after the First World War, or taken down at least after the First World War. And maybe it was not entirely anticipated that there would be a precipitation of the Second World War, because obviously delay has entered into the picture. And I suspect that the discovery of some of the secrets of the atom have also caused a delay, because humanity had in its hands the means of its own destruction. The secret of it all, he says, lies hid in the seventh ceremonial ray, and the hour for the next step onward will be given by the seventh planetary logos, working in conjunction with the three great lords, especially the Lord of the third department. So I think, what he's saying here is that the seventh ray Lord will indicate the time. And that Ray Lord is representative of the 7th planetary logos. Now, is it Uranus or Jupiter? We have to, from one point of view, the soul of Uranus can be considered as providing here the necessary energy. It is a 7th ray soul, and it's one of the sacred planets, even one of the synthesizing planets. So Jupiter has this 7th ray connected with it, but it's more prominently now acting according to its soul ray, which is the 2nd. So I would say probably Uranus. So the secret of it all lies hid in the 7th or ceremonial ray, and the timing, well, you know, one gets the feeling that what was announced here or as a possibility has not yet really occurred on any in any broad way, that something prevented the giving of some of these more specific instructions, I think. But anyway, it will happen when the time is right. I think the 20th century was filled with surprises. And at various times, even the masters did not know how it would work out. They said that in respect to the outcome of the Second World War, the outcome of humanity's fate as a result of the great power of the counterforce. They've said that on numerous occasions. He said, the sexual situation is so out of control that even the masters don't know how it will work out. So there have been, I think, a number of those critical areas where they just cannot say with exactitude what will happen. Humanity makes its own choices. But the thing to realize is that among the Ray Lords in Shambhala are those beings that represent the planetary Ray Lords, which are greater still. So every sacred planet has its representative. And every one of those sacred planets has its own ray. Vulcan ray 1, Jupiter ray 2, Saturn ray 3, Mercury ray 4, Venus ray 5, Neptune ray 6, Uranus ray 7. And they have their representatives within Shambhala on our planet, and probably on other planets as well. It would seem necessary. Okay, now our next work focuses here on the forms used in work on the 3 bodies. That's the first of the 8 categories. These forms will be some of the first revealed, and already in various meditations advocated by the wise guides of the race, you have some of the lesser foundation outlines designed for working on the lower mind. Okay. He told us in the laws of healing, you know, for instance, he gave us 7 stanzas from the old commentary. regarding ray methods of healing, and he told us that the fourth ray method would be using color and sound, be one of the first to emerge. So anyway, forms used in work on the three bodies, one of the first to emerge. These forms will be based on the special need of any one body and will seek through the manipulation of matter to build that which is needed to fill the gap and thus to supply the deficiency. So basically one has to have a very good assessment of the condition of each vehicle, and that requires the higher psychism that the master possesses. And of course, the means of manipulation have to be understood. I think we're just, sort of getting the outline of the general purpose and maybe the general procedure. The occultist ever works from the general to the particular. The manipulation of matter to build that which is needed to fill the gap, some deficiency in the vehicle perhaps, and thus to, supply the deficiency. This manipulation will be begun first on the etheric matter of the physical body by forms of breathing, respiration and inspiration, and by certain rhythmic currents set up on the mental plane and driving from thence to the lower ethers. There is a direct connection between the lower mental vehicle and the four ethers, we've been told elsewhere. And this, I suppose, involves air signs like Gemini, for instance. Okay. So first, he does say that certain forms have been given out that affect the mind right now. The lesser foundation outlines designed for working on the lower mind. Some of this is coming through, and I wonder if it can be assumed that the people for whom it is working or to whom the methods have been given have sufficient etheric development to make it possible to work on the lower mind. Anyway, again, this manipulation will be begun first on the etheric matter of the physical body, forms of breathing, respiration and inspiration, and by certain rhythmic currents set up on the mental plane and driving from thence to the lower ethers. It's that connection between the lower mind and the lower ethers, and we're even told that etheric vitality can be controlled quite a bit by the condition of the mind. That's something for us really to attend to. Okay. Now, the etheric body will thus be strengthened, purified, cleansed, and rearranged. Many of the diseases of the dense physical body originate in the etheric, and it will be an object of attention at as early a date as possible. I guess we're going to work from below upwards. We have Rule 10 given in the rays and the initiations, and we see we are clearing the etheric vehicle of the accumulations, the kind of debris, that which does not belong there. And we're driving those evil conditions backward. We're cleansing, yes, and we're also driving those conditions back onto the astral plane where they will be later dealt with. So read Rule 10 carefully and the meditation that is found there. Okay. And let's see here. I guess this purple is, my best shot at some kind of seventh ray color here in what is offered to me to use. So we begin, and it's to be expected. We're entering the age of Aquarius. It's yes, it's a highly mental sign. It's true, but along with Gemini, it really controls the etheric body. So attention to it is what humanity seems to be giving at this point, even in particle physics. These particles that appear and disappear so suddenly, I think, are etheric in nature. And there's some kind of penetration into the fourth ether, and maybe to a small degree into the third, but not into the second and the first of the normal systemic ethers. Okay. The emotional body, likewise, will be dealt with through special forms, and when the pupil has strenuously cultivated the quality of discrimination and made it a working factor in life, then these forms will be gradually imparted. Now, discrimination is something that we find in these charts, found on the fourth subplane of the mental plane. Depends on what we mean by discrimination. To a certain extent, we can discriminate between the world of the soul and the world of the lower mind. That is one type of discrimination. But we also have to learn to discriminate between events that are occurring on the astral plane. Some of them are glamorous, misleading, useless, destructive, and others are rightly oriented and can help us motivate the bringing through of the divine plan. So there is discrimination applied there. And notice strenuously cultivated the quality of discrimination and made it a working factor in his life. And I suppose so much of the psychotherapy that is going on now has to do with examining the world of desire, feeling, emotion, the world of glamour, the world of the astral plane, and trying to discard the desires and reactions which are useless or misleading or destructive. There are healthy desires, uplifting desires, aspirations. One of the keen discriminations would be the difference between normal desire or low desire on the one hand, and aspiration, uplifting desire towards a higher state of emotional responsiveness, a higher state of sensitivity. But until he can, and this is what DK is now going to talk about, is a higher type, perhaps, of discrimination. But until he can distinguish somewhat between the real and the unreal, and until his sense of proportion is wisely adjusted, and there comes Libra, another one of the air signs, the emotional plane should be for him a battleground and not a field for experimentation. Well, as I've been saying, there is found on the astral plane this contest between the real and the unreal, or these counter tendencies, let us say. And we have to discriminate between them. Also, if we apply the factor of discrimination higher, we would be discriminating between the world of the soul, which is, in one way, the higher mental plane, especially subplanes 2 and 3, and the world of the concrete mind, the lower 4 subplanes. But this looks like a kind of emotional discrimination that is called into play when we begin to study how glamour works, the effects of glamour, the feeling for what glamour is. I can remember certain times in my life when I should have been more alert, but glamour was descending. Some change in energy occurred. I should have had the right feel for it. I would have recognized it as glamour instead of recognizing it as, or thinking it was simply something attractive. So we get used to this discrimination in the field of sentiency. Now, let's see what else he says here. Let me illustrate the type of work that these forms, which work on emotional matter, will accomplish. Okay, at least to have some idea, if not all the particulars. Yeah. The aim of the pupil who treads the path is to build an emotional body that is composed of matter of the higher subplanes, leaving out, of course, subplane 7 and subplane 6. He tells us those subplanes have no place in the emotional body, the astral body of the disciple. To build an emotional body that is composed of matter of the higher subplanes, is clear and sensitive, an accurate transmitter, and which is characterized by a stable vibration, a steady rhythmic motion, and is not prone to violent storms and the agitating effects of uncontrolled emotion. So, looks like we are trying to have the Ray 2 astral body. The storms and tempers and sudden uncontrolled movements come in more with the 6th ray, and to a certain extent even with the 1st ray in the releasing the storms and tempers. We might think the 4th ray astral body would have something to do with the undesirable condition before harmony is achieved, but strangely, while DK does give an example of the 5th ray and 7th ray astral bodies, he doesn't give any example of a 4th ray astral body. Why is this so? Anyway, we need a more sensitive, clear, receptive, stable astral body. That is our goal. And gradually we do achieve that. And then I think the astral body is characterized by the second ray. It always seems to be the objective to achieve that. Even when you have a first ray astral body, it has to result in either the sixth ray or the second ray. It doesn't stay that way. And generally speaking, transitions from the sixth ray astral body are to the second ray astral body. I think, yes, Foster Bailey had that. Alice Bailey had the second ray astral body. Roberto Saggioli, an initiated disciple, had the second ray astral body, in which both the soul and the personality were focused. And others around them may be the first ray or the sixth ray, in large part. When the idealism is high, when the percentage of matter of the two higher subplanes is approaching somewhat the desired figure, what is it, 75% atomic matter at the third degree, 50% atomic matter at the second degree, 100% atomic matter at the fourth degree, but probably, at different stages and transitional moments, there are desired figures, desired proportions. And when the pupil recognizes practically all the time that he is not his vehicles, that is such a Raja Yoga statement, but is indeed the divine dweller within them, then certain things will be imparted to him which, when carefully followed out, will do two things. So this sets for us, our goal is being stated. And we can see that there are certain mathematical percentages, I would say, that indicate that a goal has been reached. The two higher subplanes of, imagination and emotional idealism. Imagination, subplane 2, emotional idealism, subplane 1. Okay. Right. Repeating. When the idealism is high, now it is possible, I think, to have a well-trained sixth-ray astral body along the Neptunian line rather than the reactive, fiery Martian line. There are two centers of force within the solar plexus, the lower and the higher, and the lower, I believe, belongs to Mars and the higher belongs to Neptune. There's real aspiration in the Neptunian center in the solar plexus, and there is more ordinary desire in the Martian center. So we have a moving of aspiration towards the heart on the through the higher of those points within the solar plexus. And Neptune, of course, has much to do with imagination as well. And with yes, of course, the emotional idealism. So when the percentage of matter of the two higher subplanes is approaching somewhat the desired figure, we've only been told that at certain initiations, the astral body is composed of a certain percentage of atomic matter, but we haven't been told about the relative percentages. For instance, at, let's say, the second initiation, when 50% atomic matter characterizes the astral body, what other kind of matter at what percentage should be found if the desired figure is to be reached? Okay, going on, and when the pupil recognizes practically all the time that he is not his vehicles, but is indeed the divine dweller within them, and that is so very important. And we have that exercise. I have the vehicle, but I am not the vehicle, you know. I have an astral body, an emotional body. I have emotions, but I am not those emotions. At first, we must discriminate what we are internally as a soul from what we use as vehicles. Later, perhaps under the spell of synthesis, we understand that all things are ourselves. Then certain things will be imparted to him, which, when carefully followed out, will do two things. Okay, what are these two things that will happen? I suppose in the training of or in the sensitizing of the astral vehicle. First, and excuse me, they will act directly on his emotional body, driving out foreign or lower matter and stabilizing his vibration. Now, these are the things that are imparted. Certain things will be imparted to him, and their effects are now being discussed. So what is this first effect? Basically, this is purification, let's say. I'll fix that. Stabilization. Purification and stabilization. They will, okay, and yeah. And it looks like this is second. Okay. Second, they will build in emotional matter a body or form that can be used for certain work and can employ as his agent to attain results that will be part of the purificatory and constructive work of the emotional body. This is rather obscure. This is as much as can be said, but it will serve to show the type of form aimed at. And so what we have here is building in emotional matter a body or form that can be used for certain work. And we don't know what that body or form may be. Okay, and up here, driving out foreign or lower matter and stabilizing his vibration. And this is what is imparted to him. So the building of a form for constructive, okay, the building of a form within the astral body, which is for the purpose of purificatory or constructive work. Okay. So we have to recognize that we are the divine dweller within the vehicles, and we can operate from that perspective. Okay, so let me put that in. We must learn to operate from the perspective of the divine indweller. And then a kind of teaching can be given. Certain things, and let's just call it most likely teaching, will be imparted to him, which when carefully followed out, so let's call it teaching or procedure, followed out, will drive out the foreign matter, stabilize the vibration of the astral body, and a form will also be built within that vehicle for certain kinds of work of a constructive nature. He's not saying too much. He's just giving us a little here. But it's something to think about. Obviously, this is a book which has constantly to be reviewed, I would say. I'm finding, I read it earlier, and I begin to realize not as carefully as I should have. The DK statement is to read more carefully. He says, pay attention to my words, pay closer attention to my words, read more carefully rather than simply skimming over what looks easy to understand, but which may hold many points of illumination if we deal with it cautiously. Okay, so this is building, or should we say, working etherically and also astrally. He only hinted slightly at the idea of the mental building. Let's see if yeah. In the work, some of the meditative work given by the guides of the race already, we have some of the lesser foundation designs or outlines designed to work on the lower mind, but he doesn't really specify. He says less about it, actually, than about the work in the astral body. However, there are gaps in the mental body, and these gaps have to be filled. And so the outlines will help to fill the gaps. And there's manipulation of the etheric body, and he hints that breathing exercises and the achievement of right rhythm. Certain rhythmic currents set up on the mental plane. He doesn't really tell us how they are done, but he's hinting at methods that will be used. Enough for us to grasp that there is a kind of method that we may not have suspected in working with each of these vehicles. About the astral body, he seems to say a bit more, and perhaps that's because so many people, even disciples at first, are focused within their astral body. He tells about the need for discrimination, distinguishing between the real and the unreal, especially on the emotional level, and that's part of the work of dissipating glamour. And a proportional emotional response is required. And so he spends more time here. In any case, we are not yet receiving these forms. But we are at least gathering some sense of what they will help to accomplish. And of course, we have to think about the use of the word Om. It may not finally be the sacred word. It is and it isn't. It stands certainly for the sacred word, and it does have the effect of casting out unwanted matter, drawing in the desirable matter of a higher type, and in general, of stabilizing whatever vehicle it is working through. And it looks like it can be used, I would say, in connection with the purification and stabilization of the astral body. Now we have another subject, and I think I will get into it a little bit here. It's not a long section, but filled with potential. It has to do with ray forms. This is a profoundly interesting and vast subject. Maybe that's why he's not writing so much about it, and may only be indicated in one way, in that he knows how much to say and what not to say, of what length to say when dealing with certain subjects. Certain forms built up on the numerical aspect of the various rays are the special property of those rays and embody their geometrical significance, demonstrating their place in the system. Now that's a profoundly occult statement. Special property. So it sounds like they are not going to be haphazardly, generally, widely released, but only to those who can deal correctly with the subject. Certain forms built up on the numerical aspect of the various rays. And he does talk about the numerical aspect in one way. He says the first ray is particularly related to the second. Well, you see that through multiplication or addition particularly. The second ray is related to the fourth, and there, through multiplication and addition, we can see the relationship. And the third ray to the sixth, again, through multiplication and addition. So those are numerical relationships. And we're basically relating arithmetic to geometry. In this case. And are the special property of those rays, ray lords, and embody their geometrical significance, demonstrating their place in the system. Now, let's just say that when the ray lords influence, they may do so through a specific type of geometry. Let's see, a type of geometry is associated with each ray lord. Now, in Hudson's book, he does give some of the geometry. I think, what do we have? The circle with a point, he connects it with the first ray, but of course it has some inclusive second ray significance as well. And he goes through the various rays and gives us figures, geometrical figures for them. I think they are evocative symbols. I'm not sure they are the ones which are being hinted at here. Some of these forms being on the concrete rays or building rays are the line of least resistance for the occultist, while other forms on the abstract or attributive rays are more easily followed by the mystic. Well, among the rays of attribute, there are two which are, I would say, on the occult line, and two which are on the mystic line. Rays 4 and 6 on the mystic line, rays 5 and 7 more on the occult line. But we're going to look for, we have 5 Platonic solids. We might relate the 5 Platonic solids here, but it cannot be a complete correlation, because after all, there are in our system only 5, and we're dealing with 7 rays. But I would say, the triangle, for instance, in relation to the third ray, and I'm remembering an odd form related to the fourth. I would say also the 5-pointed star might be considered. The triangle, and the 5-pointed, or let me just call it the pentagram, might be considered. But as for the others, I don't think they have been given as such in any book. These forms are for 3 objects in this consideration of ray forms. They put the pupil in direct contact with his own ray, either the egoic or personality ray. Now that would be a very handy thing, wouldn't it? That contemplating a particular geometrical form, just the way when we contemplate certain colors, we could be put in touch with our own particular ray. I think the cross, one of the crosses, is the symbol for the second ray, as given by Hodson. And there are some interlocking V's or W's for the fourth ray. I think the diamond formation comes out of that. I think a five-pointed star, yes. And the swastika, and maybe a balanced swastika, turning in both directions simultaneously, is for the seventh ray. I think, forgetting the sixth ray symbol that he gave. The sixth ray Lord is called the sword bearer of the Logos, and I'm wondering whether the image of the sword, which is not quite geometrical, might be involved there, but I'd have to look that up again. Anyway, circle with the dot, first ray, one of the crosses, second ray, triangle, third ray, interlocking V's or W's, forming a diamond, fourth ray. It would seem to me that might not be quite the kind of geometrical symbol that's being discussed here. The five-pointed star, the pentagram, yes, for the fifth ray, I think, and something, also another image is coming to my mind for it's more like a clover, or it has rounded leaves, and I think there are four of them. But of course, there is the six-pointed star. I don't think Hodson uses that, and he definitely uses a swastika. Now, is it one of the swastikas turning right or left, or is it both together? So, having the right symbol will put us in touch with our particular ray, whether it's the soul ray or personality ray. And as I say, these are like spiritual numerals. Having the right color will do that. Having the right note or pitch of music will do that. So there are different ways to get in touch with our own ray. And when we're dealing with color and sound, we're using a fourth ray approach to our own ray. When we're using geometry, perhaps it's a more second ray approach, because the second ray is called the Grand Geometrician in the names of the ray lords in Esoteric Psychology number 1. So these forms are for 3 objects. And let's continue and see what he says they are. They link him up with his group on the inner planes, either the group of servers, the group of invisible helpers, or later his egoic group. Well, maybe the servers are more the most external of the groups, but still, as they exist on the inner planes. The invisible helpers, I think Leadbeater talks a fair amount about that, and how people are working on the astral plane. I may have mentioned that one of the people in the arcane school, who was a member of the Tibetans group, said that during the war they were employed as invisible helpers, and they, very concretely, he says, upholding the soldiers who were part of the Normandy invasion, upholding them in the water. It's an interesting story, and as I say, interesting if true. And later we go still higher onto the higher mental plane and deal with the egoic group. And there are quite a few of these groups. You know, if you turn to Letters on Occult Meditation, page 39, is it? I think we'll take a quick look. Okay. You'll see that on the Buddhic plane and on the Atmic plane and on the monadic plane, there are also groups. They're not egoic groups, they're sort of triadal groups, super triadal and even monadic groups. If I were to, let me just check this, and then I have to remember to show it to you, don't I? All right, so yes, I have it, but I fear that it is in blue, and so I'll have to change the color, because it's just, I love the blue, but it's just not going to show properly. Well, yeah, on the mental plane, there are these different egoic groups. So let me show you there. Now you should see page 38 and 39 of this book. We've, reviewed that. There are three different kinds of groups, and what are the specifications of each? I would say on the third subplane, we have groups that are not necessarily disciplic on their outer expression or in their outer expression. By the time we reach the second subplane, we definitely have groups that have preliminary initiates in them, initiates of the threshold 1 and 2. By the time we reach the first subplane, we're dealing with the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad, and we're dealing, I think, with groups that will have third degree initiates expressing that way on the outer planes. And then as far as what these other super egoic groups may be, third subplane, first subplane, for Buddhic plane and the Atmic plane, the atomic subplane of the Atmic, 14 groups. Of course, that's an area we can't really reach, so it's more about the future. And the monadic plane has 7 great groups. So this is a good page to remember when talking about the tendency to form or be part of the formation of groups on the inner planes. Okay. And point C, these forms are for 3 objects: being in touch with one's own ray, egoic or personality, linking up with groups on the inner planes, and what the group of servers, invisible helpers, and later egoic groups. And maybe what we have is kind of a physical, astral, mental idea there. And then finally, they tend to merge the occult and the mystic paths in the life of the pupil. Now that is interesting. These geometrical forms help with the merging of the paths. Now, the mystic Neptune, the occultist Uranus. So there's something about the merging of the influence under those 2 planets. Okay, how shall I do this. I'll do it that way. Should he be on the mystic path, he will work at the forms upon the rays of aspect, and so develop knowledge of the concrete side of nature, that side which works under the law. So let's just say rays of aspect have something to do here with the concrete side of nature. And you can reverse the case for the man of occult tendency till the time comes when the paths merge and all forms are alike to the initiate. In any case, it looks like we would work with forms which are not the kinds of forms we are used to working with. But in order to achieve a balance, we'll work with the opposite types of forms. And is he saying that the rays of aspect have to do with concretion? Anyway, they work under the law. And if we have the occult tendency, we will work with the forms related to the rays of attributes. So I think we have to really study this little section because it's not giving us all the information we want, but it is hinting strongly. It's as if the mystic works with attribute usually, as if the mystic usually works with rays of attribute, and the occultist usually works with rays of aspect, and each must switch for rounding out. Yeah, so when working with the rays of aspect, we are working under the law, and when we work under the law, occultism is suggested. When we work under the law, then occultism is suggested. And we can reverse the case. You have to remember that at this point of merging, a man works ever primarily on his own ray. When he has transcended the personality and found the egoic notes. This is fascinating here. Then he manipulates matter of his own ray and works through his own ray forms with the 6 representative subray forms until he is adept and knows the secret of synthesis, and these forms are taught by the teacher to the pupil. Well, what can we say? How much? But that's not correct. How much? We do not know. So first, our own ray, and then the subray forms upon our own ray, and this will bring about an apprehension, a kind of a realization of synthesis. So we realize how dependent we are right now upon the wisdom of the teacher. The teacher has had imparted to him by his superiors at a certain point exactly what these forms are. And then they come to us, and one day we will be the teachers who impart the forms. We have to find our personality and egoic note. And by that, I suppose even a note of music is suggested. I've done some experimentation with that in classes, and people have worked with the assignment that Blavatsky has given to different planets and thus to different rays. But there are a number of combinations which can be used, and there's no hard and fast rule about what we should use in any particular case. So we're learning to work on the subrays, and this will be this work upon sub-ray forms will be via the personality ray from one perspective. There are also soul ray sub-ray forms, but I think they do not change so much. I think that they are more stable, and the personality keeps on changing to give us opportunity upon all the rays except perhaps the ray of the soul itself, and even that can happen at a certain higher point of evolution. So very interesting. And I just want to distinguish paragraph from paragraph, or they're not really paragraphs, but section from section. When I see the word manipulate, I think of the color green and the third ray. So, as DK said, we've been working on all the personality rays, and they are to be considered subrays, not the only subrays, but they are to be considered subrays of our soul ray. You will find that though I have imparted but little on this subject yet, if you brood over what I have given, it contains much. It may give those who wisely assimilate it the key they seek for their next step on. I may touch on this and somewhat enlarge when we take up the subject of access to the masters through meditation. Okay. I think that's about all that we'll do right now. There are some real extensive descriptions given ahead, longer sections. And there's one, mantric forms, that I have not marked as I should. Okay. So we've done two of these, more specific study of the kinds of forms that can be used by the student when rightly imparted by the teacher. Okay, friends, yes, that will be all that I can do tonight. This is a book of no excessive simplicity. There is a lot of intricacy in it and many, many hints given. And so, it has to be read very carefully. What we're doing right now is just a little bit of an introduction and a musing, brooding upon what the Tibetan has said. But to follow out all these hints, we'll never follow them all out, but certain things will jump off the page for you, and they will be the hints that you must follow. And that works for either one of us. That's any one of us. That's the method, the modern method of giving hints in the mass of the material that the student may read. So next we'll take up the forms in healing. We've had the forms for the purification and constructive sensitization of the personality vehicles. And we've had the geometrical forms related to the Ray Lords. And I guess the only way to deal with that is to take certain of the possible geometrical forms if you know yourself to be on a particular ray, whether personal or egoic, and to see what the effect might be. We have not really been given those forms, but some of them we may imagine. And it seems quite likely, with everything, for instance, that's said about the third ray and Libra and the third subplane and the triple flowers and Saturn and the color green, all of those things. It's quite likely that using the triangle would help us connect with that ray. And maybe it depends on what kind of cross we use to connect with either the second or the sixth ray. Because, there is the long-armed cross, and then there's more the equal-armed cross. And they may lead to different rays. So it's a fascinating topic. And one day, the forms to be used in meditation to contact our inner qualities in our inner centers will be imparted. Meanwhile, we're learning all about it, just as is the case with white magic, learning a great deal that, if learned properly, will make the work of imparting the details more rapidly assimilated later. So, lots of love, many blessings, and study hard, meditate deeply, and of course, our service at this critical time is the main thing. Oftentimes an educational service, because humanity needs to learn about these things. Okay, see you before long.